Okay, guys, we're going to get started. I want to go over a little bit of the homework. First, we got a big day today. We finally actually get into compositing today. Crowd goes wild. You don't seem to be going that wild, just saying. I know, right? Thank you. I feel like I had to work for that one. Okay. So, Jared, you should feel honored that we start with you every single week. Okay. So I just want to point out a couple things. This is, again, something that happened quite a bit. And you can spot it right here. This is what Jared's hair patch looks like. And let me find where we can actually get to it. Hang on one second. So here it is. If you take a look at this, turning this guy on and off, you can see I'm not as concerned about where it starts. In an interesting way, it actually starts out pretty good. There's sort of like a fade off into, so I can, if I'm not really paying hardcore attention to it, I don't really, I'm not really spotting that it's not necessarily growing really out of her skin, but you can see this line that runs across the top right here. And the line that's running across the top, again, it's where the new hair, this is what the hair patch looks like. And you can see there's all sorts of transparency in here. There's, again, all of this happens, so there's strands of hair that go to a certain point and then they just end, and then new hair starts. And again, I would say that more of you did a version of this than didn't do a version of this. So the trick to this is, even though all of this hair that's up in the top did not need to be replaced, it's all good hair, it still makes more sense if you're going to try to reintroduce a new hairline here that you continue that hairline all the way through to the very edge of the frame, so that even though you're covering up good hair, it doesn't matter because you are making this entire thing believable. Does that sort of make sense to everyone, what I'm talking about here? Great. It's not really fair to say this, but I will point it out right here. There was two ways that you could actually fix the teeth. One was to actually rebuild using the teeth that she already had, which was a challenge, but it's still doable. A number of you actually did it really pretty well. The other solution is, if you looked in the assignment folder, there was a whole folder in there that was labeled new mouths. And they were versions of lips and teeth that I've found on the internet over years, trying to find one that would actually function as a good replacement for her. It's tricky because when you start to replace things like a mouth or eyeballs or a nose or that kind of thing, one of the biggest challenges that you have in doing it is having your camera perspective be the exact same thing for the new image that you're replacing to match the old image. So for instance, if my camera is a little bit higher than the mouth, then the replacement also has to be slightly higher than the mouth. If the mouth is turned slightly to the left or the right, you need the same angle, otherwise stuff doesn't match up. So at any rate, and then there's the lighting. But all of that at any rate. I didn't really take any points off of it, but because we hadn't gotten into Liquify. But this is a perfect example of Liquify that does not deal with body image. It doesn't deal with any of those issues right here. It's simply a way to rebuild her teeth. And you can see on one of her teeth, it looks like this one on the right has been chipped. So you could go in with Liquify and you could actually rebuild that tooth. Not to make it like perfectly straight across, because that's not how teeth really are, but to deal with the whole sort of like chip part in there that was really the issue. As long as we're here, I'm going to talk about how you actually uncross the teeth. And the biggest issue with uncrossing the teeth is that the tooth that's on the right side right here is actually casting a shadow on the tooth that's on the left-hand side, and that's the giveaway. That's how come the teeth look crossed. If you can eliminate that shadow and make these the same tone, which we will look at the people who did it later on who actually managed to do that, then the teeth no longer are crossed. I mean, it's just that simple, right? Again, this is a two-dimensional thing that we're dealing with. So the idea that you see these teeth as being crossed is the illusion that is given to you from the shadow that's happening on the right tooth is casting a shadow on the left, and also the highlights that are happening on the right tooth right here, because that tooth is further out. It actually is being hit more by light. That's actually, the main light on this is coming from the right side. It's actually hitting the bottom of that. So it's those inconsistencies that are the information that you get that's saying that these teeth are indeed crossed. So if you can eliminate the shadow that's being cast and eliminate the highlight on the front, the teeth will end up being at the same level. Also, it helps if you straighten up the division, the line that actually goes between the teeth. But again, we'll look at that later on because a number of people actually did that. So we have talked a little bit about layer order. I want to talk about that again really quickly. We're going to take a quick peek at Amanda's. And so I'm going to pull the layer stack out so that we can actually take a look at it, just as a reminder in terms of how the best way to sort of like go about doing these things. We're going to see one problem in here, and then we'll actually talk about how to fix this problem. But it happens when you're starting to do split frequency work. And you can see that in Amanda's case, what she basically did, we'll start out just with the regular image. So this is what the image looked like. She adds a white background, then she actually does the knockout, and she does the spill removal, and everything here is fine. But then she goes into doing her split frequency work, and you'll see that she's putting a layer mask on each one of these split frequency layers. And you would think that there's nothing wrong with that. However, the problem that you run into with this is that, see if I can actually show you what it looks like. No, we're not gonna, hang on one second. We don't pick it up in here as much. I'll show you a version of this as we get in, as we go down the line here just a little bit more. But the problem that you run into doing these masks on split layers, it's the high layer is fine when you do it for that part, but the low layer, because you actually blur the low layer, it bleeds out underneath the mask, and what ends up happening is you get this weird brown halo that will actually come around the image that is almost impossible to get rid of. Instead of showing you the solution with this one, because we don't really see the problem with this one, I'm going to show you the solution in just a second, because there's another issue here where you really see the more classic version of what happens. But at any rate, going back to her lay order right here, this whole part starts out fine, and then you can see, so again, she does the knockout, then she goes and she does her split frequency work, which is fine. Then she actually takes that all she combines that all into a single layer, which is what's going on right here. Then she starts to do her hair fix on top of this. The thing is that the hair fix is a pixel fix in this, and in most cases what you really want to do to avoid all of these problems, to avoid the putting layer masks on your split frequency, where all that kind of stuff, whatever, is the trick is to create a new version. So once you get through the layer mask, once we get to this stage of the game, that she's got the knockout, we've actually got the spill has been removed, I would have then brought the hair fix down here. The hair fix would go right above all of that. Let me make sure, yeah, the FS is off. So this is now, I'm going to turn the hair fix on. So the hair fix is in there, all of this stuff is in there, and then again, holding your top layer, make sure that everything that you don't want to be part of this is turned off. So I'm turning off all of the frequency separation stuff, all the tonal stuff, all of that kind of stuff. At this stage of the game, you select the very top layer, hold down Command, Option, Shift, and hit the letter E, and you do a merge stamp version, and this becomes your new version. And that is what you then would start your split frequency work with. Then she actually gets back on track and does her tonal stuff on top of this, which is actually correct in order. So remember, It starts out when you're doing this kind of work that all of the pixel stuff happens first, the tonal stuff happens on top of that, then color happens on top of that, and then finally you get into liquefy and then output sharpening. So that's going to be the way we continue to go. So again, not that in the end of the world that this ended up being wrong, it's just that sometimes the problem that we want to avoid is you don't want to have pixel content sitting up above your tonal work, because if you do, it means that you either are ignoring your tonal work or that you had to bake your tonal work into the pixel content that's sitting up on the top. Now, eventually, if you do get into liquefying your image, that step comes after doing your tonal work. So you're gonna have to do that merge, and you're gonna have to actually bury those tonal retouching layers into the layer, the pixel layer that you ultimately liquefy. So at a certain stage of the game, this is unavoidable, but at least it gets you the normal process for it until you get to liquefy is pretty much the same. Did that make sense, everybody? Are we good on this? Are there questions about this? All right. I want to show you JP's next. And if you take a look at this, it's just really beautiful frequency separation work. If you take a look at where he's actually replaced certain things, here I'll show you what it looks like on and off. So this is the on-off part. And the thing that matters about all of this, I mean, the advantage that frequency separation really gives you is the ability to keep texture. So in the areas that he is changing things, like right here, all the hairs in here, the smile lines, all that kind of stuff, all of that gets replaced with skin that actually has texture as well. And that's what we're looking for. A number of people here, and I'll show you some examples of this later on, actually came on this other side and started to sample color on this highlight side over here. There's two reasons that this is problematic if you're using this as your source to replace the texture, is that number one, the skin over here on this side, it's in the light side, in the side where our light is, where actually the light is in the studio. And because of the angle of her face, it's being pretty flatly lit. We don't really have any highlights or shadows over here to speak of, so there's no real texture over here. If you look at this part, and it's also, the second thing, lighting is suppressing the texture, but it's also falling out of focus. As we start to move from her mouth back towards her ear, depth of field kicks in. And so this area in here, it's not only doesn't have any texture because of the light, it also doesn't have any texture because it's soft because of the depth of field. If you sample from this area right here and use it, well here, I'll show you an exact example of it. Let's just open this up and we'll see. So, yeah. So if I come in here to an area like this, I'm going to grab my clone stamp tool, make it a little bit larger. I'm going to sample this area right here that has basically no texture. If I use that to then do the texture area that's here on her upper lip, you can see it no longer has any texture, and it's actually thrown this out of focus, and that wouldn't be because everything else right at this stage or at this distance from the camera actually is in focus. So it really makes a difference paying attention to the sources that you're using to replace texture. It's a little more forgiving when you're doing your low frequency work because that's really all about color and tone, and color and tone is consistent over the entire image, but this detail part is not. It's something that you really need to pay attention to. I'm going to show you Robin's next, because this is a version of that where you run into trouble actually doing the split frequency work, and you can see in here, hang on one second. This is what ends up happening is you get this whole glow that's happening around this guy. If we actually turn this off, yeah, it's this strange halo that's happening around here. The reason that this exists is because of, here, let me pull this layer stack out again. It's because there is a layer mask on every one of the split frequency layers. So this simply, again, the problem that you run into here is that the layer mask is fine for the high frequency ones, but because we've blurred the low one, what ends up happening is when you blur the low image, the image actually, everything gets softer, but it also expands. Part of that blur comes out into the background, and it ends up getting revealed here, and that's where the issue is. So I don't know if this is actually going to work. I'm going to try it really quickly right here. I'm going to turn off all of the layers that are actually on there. I'm going to load one of them, though, and then put it on the group itself. I think if we mask the group, no, it's still there, even if we mask the group. So again, the solution to all of this is to build the new version first that's actually got the girl completely knocked out, spill all removed, and the white background all built into one, and then start your split frequency work from there. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Say what? The thing is, you don't want to do that much work. You know, it's just easy to do. Just go ahead and do the knockout, remove the spill, create a different background, start a brand new version of it there. Otherwise, it can get just increasingly more and more complicated. And again, as you guys are beginning to find out, I think, that once things start to get complicated, rarely do they get easier as you continue. It only seems to get more and more complex. So, yeah. So hang on one second, let me reset this really quickly. I want to show you Brianna's next. So in Brianna's, what we end up having here, I think it's one of those cases, this was exactly, what I was talking about, trying to get sort of away from. It looks to me like she's actually gone in and pretty much used that softer skin, this sort of skin that's got zero texture at all, to pretty much surround everything. You can see all of this in here. It's really lost most, if not all, of its texture. It's not completely gone. I mean, there's a very sort of subtle thing in here, but it has a little bit of a plastic sort of, feeling vibe to it. It just looks over smooth to me, and I think, again, part of the reason is that it's a constant. If we take a look at her frequency separation layer, this is what her the initial split looks like. So you can see that there's detail in all of this, especially we'll look at this side over here. And again, I'm just looking at the high layer by itself. I'm going to continue to look, and this is what our other one looks like. And you can see it's just all completely smoothed out. So the trick is you want to get rid of the offending texture. So you wanted to get rid of the hairs and the pimples and all that kind of stuff. But you wanted to do it by replacing texture of skin where there was still remaining pores in her skin, but that was what we would consider to be better skin or good skin here. So anyway, I just wanted to show everybody that. I want to take a look at Sophie's next. So in Sophie's case here, I sent her an email about this. Oh, by the way, you know you're working in 16-bit.
I saw that.
It's fine. It's fine. It's overkill, but it's fine.
Can I change that on Photoshop?
Yes. So what I'm saying to Sophie is you saw how long it took that file to open up, and it's because the file is actually twice the size that it needs to be. It's in 16-bit. She really only needs it to be in 8-bit. So if she wants to change this after effects, so what happens is that a lot of you, especially a lot of you have been taught that the way you bring an image out of, is anybody still working in Lightroom and bringing your images from Lightroom into Photoshop? So when you do that, how are you doing it? So edit, work in Photoshop. That's how you do it. So if you're doing it, edit, and then it's open in Photoshop as Smart Object, you're fine because that's actually the way to do it. But if you're not doing it, the way most people are taught in the beginning is you just say edit in Photoshop, and the way in preferences in Lightroom you can set up how that transition is actually made, and the default is to do it in 16-bit. So at any rate, the file ends up being twice the size that it really needs to be. So you can fix that after the fact, Sophie. So for Sophie to get this to be 8-bit so that it doesn't continue to be, because being twice the size, it takes not only twice as long to open, but everything in it takes twice as long. So if you run a filter, it's twice as long. If you do sharpening, it's twice as long. Anything that you're doing that's processor intensive is twice as long because the file is twice the size. Anyway, to fix that, go up to the image menu, down to mode, and this is where you can change it from 16-bit back to 8-bit. So anyway, however, what I wanted to show you guys on this is that in Sophie's case here, you can take a look and you can see that all of the skin textures actually all remain. This is all the hairs are gone here, but this is still really beautiful texture here. It's believable. It continues over on this side. It fades out to this other side over here because this again is being flat lit and going in depth of field, but she doesn't sacrifice any of that part. So the split frequency work was beautifully done. If we take a look at her hair patch, so I'm going to show you this really quickly. So this is what her hair patch looks like. So it's this part right here. Maybe not the best. Again, I would want that to continue through here, but she's done a pretty clever trick. This is actually how I do mine. So if you take a look at this, you'll see that what it appears to be is that it looks like she has taken the original hair and simply stretched it to actually do a transform on it to make it longer to come down to line up with this area right here. So by definition, her hair patch matches up with the original hair because it's coming from the original hair. Does that make sense what's going on here? So in her case, it's successful because the hair never, that line, the top line where you're transitioning from this new hair patch to the old hair patch, whatever, was based on the old hair. So it lines up perfectly. So all these lines, all the hair all of these lines continue without having this break that actually happens in them. So that part actually worked out really well. And then finally, you can see her tooth fix right here. And her tooth fix is exactly what we were just talking about. If we take a look at the original, and then this, you can see she's actually built it pretty much completely out of the old original teeth. It's done really well because not only has she gone in and changed the shadow parts of this, she actually throws a small little bit of highlight shadow into that left tooth, which would be explained by lighting that's actually hitting this. So it really brings those teeth up so that they are flat and level on the same plane. And she does it all using either color or tone. So this is where her teeth work is. This is the new tooth right here, rebuilt from other teeth. And then this is her lightning part. This is how she goes in and changes a lot of the shadow part on that. So anyway, just really, really, really well done. Smart. Shoot.
How do you get the new version layer?
How do I do what?
New version layer. The layer.
The new teeth?
No. Go down. Yeah, new version.
Right here. So again, she had done, I'm going to turn everybody else off. So she has a white background. Sorry. White background. Then she does her knockout and removes the spill. So that's what it looks like without the mask. That removes the spill. And then again, with those 3 layers on, make sure that the top layer is selected. Hold down the Option, Command, Shift, and the letter E, and it blends, it merges all of those together into a single file.
Okay.
And you guys need to all remember that shortcut because we use this over and over and over and over and over again.
Command and Shift.
Nope. Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. I want to show you another good example of hair fix. And it's Olivia's. So this one as well, if we actually take a look at it, you can see it goes the entire distance. So if you think of this as an area of the hair that needed to be worked on, whatever, you can see she carries it all the way up to the edge of the frame. Now, one of the things I keep trying to convince you guys to do, and it's really important to do, so I'm going to say it again, and I will say it again every week for the rest of the semester, is you need to look at these things by themselves. When you take a look at this, you say, oh, that looks amazing, it's perfect. But then, if you hold down the Option key and click on it and look at it by itself, you can say to yourself, well, I'm not entirely sure that that is perfect. And then also, if you hold down the Option key and click on the mask, you can take a look at that, and you can see areas where this is not perfect. Like, who knew that there was something showing right down here through the layer mask? But this down here, I'm certain, is a mistake. I don't think she wanted that to partially show through on whatever part of this image that actually is. Does that make sense, everyone? So again, I can't beg you enough. Look at your layers, your patchwork, those layers by themselves, isolated by themselves, and then look at the layer mask also by itself. This goes for the knockout masks, any masks that you're actually making. We'll take a look at a couple of other ones later on. But anyway, this was, I thought, one of the most successful hair fixes that there was. Thought it was really well done. So I'm going to show you one last one, just because I thought, again, the teeth fix was well done here. And that is Gemma's. And again, in this case, this is built from the teeth that were in her mouth. She wasn't bringing anything in new into this game right here. So this is basically what it was. And again, it just, it matches, it's believable, the whole 9 yards, all of that. A lot of people, when they first started doing this, a couple things I want to mention or point out really quickly, just to sort of keep this in the back of your mind, is that if you're replacing the teeth or you're working on the tonal part, you need to remember, though, that how shadowing actually works. The reason this girl's teeth are actually in her mouth is this top little shadow that runs along the very top right here. If this shadow didn't exist, her teeth would appear to be at the front of her mouth, right in the front line of her lip. The reason these teeth look like they are in her mouth is because of this little shadow that runs along the very top that's being cast by her lips onto her teeth. And if we eliminate that part, when people were going in and trying to actually lighten up the teeth, the first thing that they went after was this shadow that's the darker part that's sitting right up here on the top, and that brings her whole teeth forward out of her mouth, and it just look unreal. So again, it's keeping all of that kind of stuff in mind. So if you're going to lift this shadow to try and make her teeth lighter, you need to do it wholesale. So you would select all of the teeth in the mouth and you would lift them all the same, so that at least it kept these areas down here that are the bottom part of her teeth lighter than the shadow areas. So the shadow part would remain, is I guess what I'm saying. Everything would be lighter, but the shadow would still remain. Make sense? Okay. If I can, that's it for today for this. I need everybody really quickly to open up a copy of, we're just going to do a quick little thing. I just want to show you. From our week number 7, it's the Skin Eyes Retouch file. If I can get you to open that. Actually, it's not in 7, it's in week number 6, I think. The assignment folder for week 6. Yeah, the Skin Eyes Retouch. If you've got your own file of this, go ahead. You can open that guy up as well. It doesn't make a bit of difference. It's just something that we never got to, and I want to make sure everybody here, this will actually help you out considerably. So if we zip into this area, I'm only going to go after the part, the sort of like skin texture part here that I was trying to suppress. So again, the setup for this, to do it really quickly, again, we're not going to spend a ton of time doing this, but I want to go through the process again just so that make sure this is in everybody's mind how to do this. So has everybody got this file open? Okay. So come over to the bottom of your layers palette, hold down your Option key and click on the little square that's got the plus in the middle. This just allows you to build the file. You can build it a step at a time you could add a new layer, you could fill it with gray, you could change its blending mode, but this dialog helps you just do the whole thing all in one step. We're going to call this Tonal Retouching Detail. We're going to change the blending mode from normal down to soft light, and we're going to click on fill with soft light neutral color 50% gray and say OK. So this is the setup for us to actually do this. Then I'm going to hit the D key to default my foreground and background colors to black and white. I'm going to click on the foreground color to set a new dodging or burning color. So then I'm going to sample her skin. This is going to be my, we'll do this, this is going to be my dodging color here. So to make it, it's going to be the lighter version of this. I'm going to select the radio button for brightness, and that actually makes the column a brightness adjustment. So I can grab the two little arrows and drag them up to the top. And typically I get up into the sort of low to mid 90s in my brightness. Felt relatively bright. Click on the radio button for S, which is saturation, because this is still too saturated. It's just a really strong color. And I'm going to pull it down to, again, make it lighter, but you don't want to bring it all the way down, because if you completely desaturate this, it is no longer a color. It's actually white. So I don't want to do that part. And then the hue is what I established when I clicked on her face. So that part's fine. So this is going to be my dodging color. For my burning color, I'm going to click on the background and do the exact same thing. I'm going to click on her face to sample. It actually puts in the hue. That's all I'm really looking for. In terms of the saturation for my burning color, I tend to keep that sort of in the mid, close to 50% in there, because you lose so much saturation when you get it to be really dark. And then I'm going to click on the brightness button again to control my brightness, and I'm going to click on the two little arrows and bring them down again. You don't want to go all the way down. If you bring it all the way down, it will become black, and that again is not something we want. Remember, the issue that we've got here is that when you're doing soft light work, not only do lighter colors dodge and darker colors burn, but they also, the color that you're using on that soft light layer also will tint your image. And so in this case, because we've based it on her skin, it's tinting the image, but it's based on her skin color, so everything looks perfect. If we were to only use black and white, those would still make things lighter and darker. It would still allow you to dodge and burn, but because they're gray, they desaturate the skin. And so what ends up happening is that in areas where you see really a significant amount of your retouching, it looks just gray. And so she doesn't have this skin. She'll have, you know, beautiful warm skin tone down on her cheek where you're not doing the retouching. But in this area, it will be just this really nasty looking gray, and you can't put the color back into it. There's no way to reintroduce the color into it. So anyway, that's why we take the time to actually do this part. But now we're at this stage of the game, and again, I would go to my tablet. I'm not going to do that right now. We don't need to do that. But I would hit the B key to get a brush. I would make sure that it is a completely soft brush. I would then drop my opacity of this brush down to 6%, and I would start working on these areas. So I'm going to zip in just a little bit more. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And again, I'm looking at these sort of like little darker areas that are in here. I'm going to actually lighten them. So I've got my dodging color actually sitting there, and I just start to click, 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 or tap, 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 or do all of that kind of stuff. But you do this for 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. How many of you guys got blinded to the flesh tone? It's horrible, right? I mean, you're sitting there, you're staring at this thing, and it doesn't take long. For me, it happens within an hour. It doesn't take long that all of a sudden you really are struggling to look at this. You're struggling to find out where you need to be working, doing all of that kind of stuff, because the color is saturating. Your eyes are staring at this same color for so long, it starts to really saturate your eyes, and it becomes really difficult to see this. So that's where this next trick comes in. So if you've done all this, to relieve your eyes, actually, I'm going to go to my tablet, so just 1 second. Let me just get mine turned on. To relieve your eyes, the trick to it is we are going to do, eventually we're going to get to solar curves. What we're going to do first is not really a solar curve, but it's the first really smart, good go-to movement. We're just going to add a black and white adjustment layer above this. So click on your adjustment layers, come up and do black and white. And it removes the color. But we can still do all of the work on the image that we need to do it on. But now all we're looking at is tone, and you're not being blinded to this color. You're not having your eyes be saturated with that flesh tone. Instead, they're actually just looking at grays. And so you would continue to work on this exactly the same way we did before. Make sure that you are working on your tonal retouching layer. Again, with the brush. You can see we're still working with colors over here, so I'm going to do my dodging color. So I'm just going to start tapping around and working to lighten all of this stuff up. And again, I move around really pretty. I don't stay in any one place too long, and just start hitting around here. I get bored with that, so I hit the X key, and I'm going to go to my burning colors and actually be tapping on these lighter areas in here. So even though this whole thing that we're looking at is black and white, that's an adjustment layer that's sitting up on the top. When we turn it off, we go right back to color. And so we're still doing the work on a color layer, using color, but we're previewing it or we're viewing it through this black and white lens. And you can actually see that, yes, indeed, it does exactly what it's supposed to do, even though all of that was done with a black and white layer on top. So it's just a good trick. If you're really beginning to suffer, that's a great place to see it. So the next thing we are going to talk about actually is solar curves. I'm going to throw that black and white layer away. To get a solar curve, we're going to build our first one. Everybody here is going to build one, so I want you to do the same thing that I'm doing. So this is going to happen above your tonal layer. What solar curves are designed to do is they're designed to bring out texture so that you can see things that normally you might not be able to see. So they are strictly aids. Once you're finished with them, you throw them away. They are just visual aids, just like that black and white layer that I just added on there was. So to build a solar curve, make sure that you've got your tonal retouching detail layer selected because you want it to be on top of it. And then we're just going to add a curve. So I'm going to click on an adjustment layer and come up and say I want to add a curve to this. And then I'm going to pull my properties panel down a little bit so that I can see the entire curve part of this right here. So in the properties panel, if you look at your curve, what we want to do is mountains and valleys, mountains and valleys, mountains and valleys. That's how we're actually going to build this thing. So I'm going to click on this quarter point right here, my 3/4 tones, and I'm going to drag a point all the way up to the top. I'm then going to go to my middle point and click and drag a point all the way down. And I'm going to bring it down to the point that I can actually, I'll bring it all the way down. I'm going to drag this point all the way up. So you're basically just looking at this line in this weird line like this. So I've got this sort of big M shape in here. I'm going to roughen that part off here. Oops, never mind. Undo that. So you can see it makes your image look really weird. So this, again, the reason they call them solar curves is because this looks solarized. And what you can see in here that you maybe had missed, if we zoom in using this solar curve, did everybody notice how many of those weird points that I had underneath her eye on the right, on the left-hand side, whatever, that actually needed to be retouched that nobody touched? Nobody actually did any retouching on those. Those were the white spots that you could have figured out using the solar curve. What did you need to actually use your clone stamp tool on? Because these points were too light to actually dodge or burn. And then if you turn the solar curve off, you can see, oh yeah, those are those little white spots right there that I would have had to have gone after. Well, this solar curve lets you see them right off the bat without having to worry about where are they, which ones do I really need. Does that sort of make sense, what's going on here? So the thing that I can tell you about solar curves is that there is no rhyme or reason to these. They get very bizarre. I can't tell you which one that you need to pick for which image. What I can tell you is this. If we actually go back, I know you guys are sick and tired of seeing this image, but I want to pick it really quickly just to show you. If we go back to our files from our session number 1, I'm going after the red car again. So if you can go after, go to your session number 1. It's the redcar.psd. It's the Corvette that we've been working on all along. You can close up the image of the girl. We don't need that anymore. You don't need to save it. It's not homework. But if we take a look at the car, this is where solar curves can really, really help. My first exposure to solar curves was retouching metal. And it does wonderful things for that. So if we come open this up, I'm just looking at the it would be the right fender of the car, and you can see that there's this highlight that's sitting right on the car right here. The problem with this highlight, trying to fix that or trying to remove that, is what metal do I actually pick to replace that? Do I do the metal right from the very side of it? Well, you could say that, yeah, you do that, but then look at the metal that's actually to the left of it is considerably darker. So I'm not really sure where I can pick from to actually do this. So solar curves can help point this out. So I've given you a set of solar curves that you can use, and to use them, you need to actually first, you don't really load them into your computer, but this will actually, in effect, load them for you. So to do this, start with just put a brand new curve on here. So again, I'm going to click on the icon at the bottom of my layers palette to add a curve. Once the curve is on there, you need to come up to the top of the properties menu, and straight across to the right are the three little lines to get a drop-down menu. If you click on that drop-down menu, you can actually come down and say, I want to load a curve preset. So does everybody found this place? So again, we've just put a blank curve on here. In the properties panel, all the way to the right is the menu for properties. Click on the drop-down menu and come down to load curve preset. And when you do that, it will open up a dialog box, and we need to actually navigate now to, I think, let me get, sorry, our class. I think it's in session 7, but let me make sure. Nope. Go to session 6. Yep. It's in your session class number 6. You will see that there's a folder in there called Solar Curves. And if you click on it, there's 10 of them in here. Once we load the first one, it will stay loaded in your system until you actually change systems. They carry over, I'm pretty sure, from one version of Photoshop to the next. If not, you can always load these again. But I want you to click on the number 1 solar curve and just say, OK, open. And what this will do is load the solar curve for you, and you can actually see right now that, again, it makes your image look really bizarre, but you can also see this patch, but you can see also the area around the patch that might be the best candidate for removing this highlight. So for me, when I look at this, I see a sort of a kind of a mix of purple and pink, or sort of that sort of area that's happening on the left side of the image. But I'm also getting part of that on the right side of the image. It's not as strong, but you can see the area that's over here that's really blue in this area up in here. This would not be a good candidate to actually do a clone stamp source up in here, because it doesn't fit in this area down in here. The area that's down in here on both the left side and the right side, again, it's made up of a mix of that sort of blue and magenta sort of version of this. So that's what you would actually use to replace this. You can look around on your image even more, and you can spot that same area right up here on the hood of the car. This area up in here would be a good candidate to do that work down here. So to see what that looks like, I'm going to go down to the bottom. I'm actually going to duplicate my car. So I'm selected the background copy. I'm going to hit Command J to make a copy of that. This is actually going to be my pixel retouching. So I'm going to double click on it and call it Pixel Retouch. And then I'm actually going to use the area that's up on the top of the hood of the car, just because I think it shows you how far away I can actually get from this and see if it works. So I'm going to hit the S key to get a clone stamp. Our clone stamp tool is set, mine is set to a pretty hard version of this because, again, you want to use a relatively hard stamp when you're doing your split frequency work, but that's not what I'm doing right now. This is a clone stamp replacement, so I'm going to drag it back down to 50%, which is its default. I'm going to make the tool smaller. Using my bracket keys, normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and I'm going to sample on this area where I'm getting a mix of both of those, that sort of mauve color and the purple color as well. I'm going to hold down my option key and simply sample that area and then come down and actually try to paint this in to sort of see if that doesn't actually give me a better fix on here. Now I've got a relatively hard line that's sitting on here. That's actually the hardness of my brush. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and I'm going to make this a completely soft brush because the hardness was too strong, and I'm going to try and do the exact same blend again, or the exact same clone stamping again. And I'm not even looking at this. I still have that really hard line on that. So I can clone stamp again using the area that's now closer to this. So I'm going to reset a new source and see if I can't blend that part in. But it's bringing in a lot of other stuff. That's not really going to work for me. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. And instead, I'm going to go after it using the healing brush tool. In the healing brush tool, not the spot healing, but the regular healing brush tool. And again, I'm going to sample this same area that's up on the hood of the car as my source. Make it considerably smaller. Let me check the edge on that. I'm going to leave the 50% on that, and everybody else is going to be okay on that. And then I'm simply going to go across this to see if I can't smooth that line out. That didn't do anything for me, so I'm going to sample it even bigger. So it's really not giving me the texture I want, so I'm going to sample in close to that and see if that'll do it. And that feels better. I'm going to turn my solar curve off, and this is what I've done. So again, the solar curve pointed out where I should grab my source from. Does that sort of make sense, everybody, what's going on in here? So we can actually add another solar curve, a different one on here. So again, I'm just going to select the solar curve that I've got on the very top. I'm going to click on the up in my properties panel, those three little lines. I'm going to load the next curve, solar curve. So I'm going to do, again, load curve preset. Navigate again to that very same folder, and I'm going to do solar curve number 2. And this is what it does. So you can see it's a completely different vibe on here, a completely different curve that's being made. I want to show you a couple more of these to just point out a couple things that you do need to worry about when you're using these solar curves. So again, I'm going to load the next curve preset. I'm going to go to solar curve number 3 and say OK to that. And in this case, what's happened here, and this is the important part about this, is that, again, it's not a really practical image curve for me to be working on this image. It's a better one to be working on the image of the girl. Again, there's no rhyme or reason. I can't tell you that you want to use curve number 3 for cars, or that you want, or metal, or that you want to use curve number 2. You've simply got to experiment with this. But if you take a look at what's happened in this curve, you can see by the preview that's in the solar curve panel here that this curve has been inverted. The tones of this have been inverted. What was my black point is now almost my white point. What was my white point is also almost my black point. This thing has been inverted. So actually, we need to look at this curve on the girl. So if you go up to your File menu, come down to Open Recent, and you should have the second one down, should be the Skin Eyes Retouch. If you open up the girl here, that's fine. What we're going to do is I'm simply going to grab this solar curve and drag it onto the girl. So again, from my layers panel, I'm just going to drag the curve onto the girl. It'll put the same curve on the girl. If we zip in and take a look at this, though, you'll see areas that were very light have been made very dark. Areas that are very dark have been made very light. The problem with this is that it inverts your dodging and burning. So because I've inverted this tonally, here, we'll see, it's easier to see another one here. We're going to build a different solar curve for the girl here. We're still going to use the same dodging and burning, but so I just threw away the blue solar curve on the girl. We're going to simply add another curve on top, just a regular one, but I'm going to invert it. So I'm going to simply grab the black point at the bottom lower left, drag it all the way up to the top, and grab the top point, the highlight point at the complete other side, and drag it all the way down. So now I've inverted the tonality of this. So now everything on this image that is light in reality is actually dark. So if you take a look, all the little dark areas in here have been inverted. They've been made light. But if I'm going to do my tonal retouching, so I'm going to make a quick tonal retouching layer in between these two. Again, hold down your Option key, click on the Add a New Layer, call it Tonal Retouching Detail. Change the blending mode to Soft Light. Go ahead and fill that with 50% opacity, say OK. Now if I zoom in here, the areas that I'm looking at here that are light actually are dark on my image. So to fix that, I actually need to dodge them. So this is the weird thing. So look at this area that I'm talking about right here. It seems lighter. So I'm working on my tonal retouch layer though. So typically you would think, well, I need to burn that. That is not true because this layer, my solar curve, has inverted the tonality of my image. So I am still going to make this lighter. I'm going to dodge this area. So I'm going to hit the B key. I've got my 5% opacity. It's completely soft. I'm ready to go. I've got my dodging layer that's on here to make things lighter, and this is how I fix the light areas. You can see as I start to go over this area, it's actually making it darker. Does this make sense to everyone, what's going on? Who did I lose on that one? We good? Again, the curve is inverting the image. It helps me see what I need to see, but the truth of it is this area actually, without the solar curve, this area needed to be lightened up. So I was doing my lightening, my dodging on that to actually make it lighter. So even though the curve, you would think, oh, well, that's the exact opposite. Here, I'll do an extreme version of it just so that you can see. I'm going to really crank up my opacity. Area then here, right in here. This area, we'll do this area right here, this line right here. It's too light. However, to fix it, I am actually using my light. It's okay. I'm going to do this area right in here to make it lighter using my dodging color, making it actually lighter. So I'm just going to go in this area right in here and you can see what's going on in here. So again, the effect of it is to make it darker, which is what you needed to do. Are we good on that part? All right. We can close that up. We don't need to save that. This would be a really good time for a break. So we've got a big day today, and I need everybody on their game. I've got 5 minutes of 2. Let's make this a hard 10. If you can be back at 5 after 2, that'd be great. Grab a cup of coffee or a Coke or something. You might need it.